We're going to continue now on page Yud Aleph, and we're up to paragraph number 5, number Hey. So let's just review Dalet for a moment, just backtracking. Hifrish chatas v'ovda v'hifrish acheres tachtel yachar shekvar shochat v'kibel dova shel shniya nimtzeis harishona. So in the process of hakrava vis-a-vis the second replacement carbon, he's already gotten to the point of kabbalas adam. He hasn't yet done the zrika. His leloshen echad b'gemara. His tafka gemara bazeh im hareze kenimtzeis li'achar kapara. So we assume that it's already too late. The kapara has been brought, and now that you located the original karban chatos, it becomes a chatos shemesa. Oh, kenimtzeis kodem kapara, and therefore he has the option. And certainly, according to Rav Huna, that's what we should recommend, that he bring the first karban chatos. In the footnote here, Reish Lamed Tes, he quotes a Gemara in Tfura. So again, let's just summarize what we learned yesterday. In the case where after he was mafresh, the second replacement carbon, the first carbon got lost, the first katos. Now he's already in the process of hakrava, the second carbon, the replacement carbon. He's gotten to the point where after shchita was makabel etam, it was not yet his rika, and there's one side of the Gemara to assume that this is equivalent to nimtzeis kodem kapara, because the iker kapara is in the zrika, and the zrika, the second carbon, the replaced carbon, has not yet taken place. So that would mean that now he could be makar of the original carbon. And there were many shitas that we saw yesterday about this issue, and certainly there's a representation of them that would advocate in favor of bringing the original carbon so that we avoid misa in the first carbon. And now he's saying, in the name of the Achronim, he writes, Harbe Achronim Kosvu L'tmoa Bazeh, Shekavanas Suffolk Zeh Eina Muvenis. We don't understand the deeper meaning of this suffix in Gemara. Elo Lefi Hashita Hashlishis B'Gemara. According to the third shita, that means after Rav Huna and Rabbi Abba, we have a shita nosefes, shita shlishis. Shenechlaku Rebbe v'chachamim b'nimtzeis harishona kodem kapora. The machlokes between Rebbe and Chachamim, according to the shita shlishis, is in a case where he located the original carbon before the kapara of the shniya, the replacement carbon. The afshen is kaper b'she'ena avuda hashniya, and even if he already had achieved the kapara through the second replacement carbon, mikol makom lechachamim lo tamus. Why? Because it was nimtzeis harishona before the kapara. Then they went ahead and did the kapara. It doesn't matter. The chachamim hold that it's not, the first carbon chatas is not a chatas shemesa. Now we understand the suffix of the Gemara. Nimtzeis harishona liachar kabbalas doma shel shniya, before the zrika but after the kabbalah. Im hareze kenimtzeis liachar kapara, is it considered as if it was after the kapara? Because if he found it before the kapara, then even if he would complete the kapara with the shniya, the first carbon, according to the Chachamim, would not become a chatas shemesa. Ach l'das Rav Huna Rabbi Abba. She'afim nimtzeis harishona kodem kapara mikom makom liachar sheniskap b'shniya. Harei havuda tamus l'divrei hakol. Ma mokom l'safik zeh v'nimtzeis kodem kabbalas dama shel shniya. Not sure what he means by kodem kabbalas dama. It was the case was kivel doma shel shnia v'achar kach nitzitz. Anyway, hareu miskaper b'shnia u'lefichal din havuda lamos. He's assuming now that since both Rabbi Abba and Rav Huna agreed that once the kapara was brought of the shnia, the first one is a chata shemesa. So what difference does it make if he found the korban before, let's say, Zrika Saddam, or before Kabbalah Saddam? It's irrelevant. Once he's Maskaper al Yedei Ashniya, then the first one is certainly, according to everyone, a Chata Shemesa. There's no suffix here. Okay, so now we get to paragraph number Hey. Ifrish Chatos B'nifsala B'psul Dichri. So Dichri means that once you have a psul in Mizbeach, even if you remove that psul, the korban, once it was possible, it's dachri. It can no longer be brought in the Mizbeach. For example, let's say he has two se'irim of Yom Kippur, one is Lashem, one is Lazoza. One of them dies. If you hold Bali Chaim Nidach, which itself is one, yes. So it's not enough to take a replacement for the one that died. The first one that's still alive is dachli. It's excluded and disqualified from this bed. So he was mafresh a chatos, and the chatos became a chatos psula.
Morning.
And how are you? So we're on page Yud Aleph, if you happen to have it, and we're up to number Hey.
Okay.
Okay, now we have a psul called dichui, and the issue is whether dichui is considered a chatos hamesos. And the Gemara records machlokas on this point. Im dafka liachar sheniskaper b'acheres or afilu kodem kapara. Normally we say that the halacha of chatos hamesa is undermined, is removed, if he locates the original chatos before the kapara. But in this case, there's going to be at least one opinion that maintains that dichui is a whole different category. And in the case of dichui, even if he locates the first korban chatos before the kapara of the replacement chatos, it still is a chatos shemesa. And that is a result of the status of dichui. Now, what's the case of dichui? There's one Madhyam who says yesh dichui b'bali chaim, that you can generate a psul even on a korban that's still alive, and that psul, even if the sibas hapsul, the gorem hapsul is removed, the psul remains intact. Because all v'nidchen nidchen, once it's been rejected from the Mizbeach, it will always remain dachul. In the case of Shnei Se'irim, on Yom Kippur, he's got one for Lazoza, one Lashem, and one of them dies. You have to bring both of them. You need one Lashem, which is B'fnim, and one Lazoza, which is B'chutz. Now one of them died. And if you hold Yesh Bichui B'Bali Chayim, then the other one is Nidche, because you don't have two, you need two. You're going to have to start from scratch, and you're going to have to designate two new Se'irim to replace what you're left with, one Sa'ir. And that one Sa'ir cannot be linked together with a second Sa'ir to form a group because of the principle of Dichui. That once it's Dichui, it's always Nidche, right? Why do we doche the second Sa'ir? Because we need both Sa'irim. It's a pair, and until death do us part. But now he adds another Sa'ir to replace the one that died. The first one is not kosher. Why? Because yesh dichui b'malei chayim. He says, the mikra ze atzmo ein bo din chatos hamesos. Kevon shu korban tzibur. Okay, now we get into another issue about korban tzibur, whether or not there's a chatos hamesos in a korban tzibur. We touched on this. But let's just leave out that issue for a moment, we'll bracket it. But let's say, for example, in the case of two se'irim, even if I replace the second sa'ir that died, and the first sa'ir is still alive, we're still going to apply the principle of dichur. And that would make it into a chatas hamesos. So the fact that you didn't achieve the kapara yet on the second sa'ir, that's not the same deal that we've been discussing until now, where you have a replacement korban because you lost the first korban. He says, "Mevur begemara sharak dichui kigon seh hu sheposem below dichui shel avoda she'im timtzu yuchal akriva." He says that let's not confuse dichui with avuda. In the case of avuda, right now it's lost. We just have to locate it. Once we locate it, we can bring it on the mizbeach. In the case of dichui, there was a psul that was chal, because once you have one sawyer out of the two, because the other sawyer died, then that one sawyer is hustle in his back. We don't bring it. It has no din or status of a chatas because it's already one and not two. Ubedichui shall ibra shnasa nechleku rishon. I'm not sure what he means by ibrashnos. I would have said avrashnos. But maybe he means that they added an extra month to the year. Maybe that's what he means by ibra. So you have to know in what cases that could cause a dichui to the korban. All right, now we get back to our original discussion. You may remember from a few days ago, maybe it was Thursday of last week, where he designates ma'os. He sets aside two aremos, two piles of ma'os, to buy a chatas. And the second pile is meant to be a backup, a kind of insurance policy that if he loses the first pile, he will buy a chatas from the second. So dina mafresh ma'os l'chataso, v'nevda hamos v'hifresh mos achirim tachtein. So he had designated certain mos, and they flew the coop. He lost them, and now he replaces them with another set of mos. He takes those second replacement mos, and he goes out and he buys a chatos to replace the first chatos. V'niskaper b'achirim, and he already brought the second korban with the second set of mos on the mizbeach. That's called niskaper ba'achirim. Kidin mafresh behema l'chatosam. Shall we accept an analogy, an equation between mafresh behema and mafresh ma'os lebehema? And right now he's saying that l'chora, there should be an analogy, an equation between the two. And just like if the chatas itself gets lost, it's lemisa, so too, if the ma'os get lost, then we have a problem of chatas shemesa. Ella, but he says, on second thought, Im nimtzu harishonim kodem sheker v'sashniim yesh lem takana yidei sheyavi karbon chatas me'elu u'me'elu. What's unique about the case of ma'os, which does not apply in the case of the zevach itself, the animal itself, is that if you find the original ma'os and you haven't yet been makriv the korban that you bought with the replacement set of ma'os, so the Gabra is still chayiv and a chatos. He has achieved his kapara, and he hasn't patted himself up from the chayiv chatos. Is yesh lem takana. Here, when he finds the original ma'os, he can solve his problem, which you can't do if you have the behemoth. If you find the behemoth, what? Sheyavi karuchatas meilu meilu. He can, what's the word I want to use? He can, I forgot the word, but he can add the two piles of most and combine them, mix them up, and go ahead and buy a chatos, a single chatos, with both piles of most. Again, he may have to find an upgraded animal, that costs more. It's a mitzvah, it's a mina muvchar. You remember we spoke about mina muvchar, that he finds a shomegos. But in the case of an animal, it's either or. Bring this animal, the first or the second. You can't bring both. There's only one chatos, and you can only bring one chatos. But in the case of damin, here's the word I was missing: pool, Pool. You can pool together the two mohs, and then buy a chatos with both mohs. In that case, he's been honest, living up to both hakdoshos. The hakdosh of this set of mohs and that, and he's brought one chatos. So it doesn't have a psul of chatos hamesos. Is yeshlam takana yidei sheyakriv korban chatos me'elu u'me'elu. But now he asks the following question: what happens if, let's say, he had 100 and 100, he pooled them together and he bought a chatos at 150, so he's left with an increment of 50. He says, "Gama nishar ein bo din misa me'achar shekorbanot korev mikol echad mehem." Ellen, this is an amazing chiddush. As long as he dips into each one of the two aremos of mohs, he has covered his bases. Meaning that when let's say he designated another 100, right, in addition to the original 100, that 100 has to touch base on the korban, on the mizbeach, and to touch base, all you need is some segment, some part of that mohs, and then there's no din of chatas hamesa. So since he pooled the money and he represented both of these aremos in the actual purchase of a korban chatas, then he's okay. Now, what does he do with the surplus mohs? That he doesn't tell you. I suspect, again, I'm just guessing, he doesn't talk this out, that those mohs revert to become kulit. Why? Because when he designates clothes for a chatas, he doesn't know exactly how much money the chatas is going to cost him. He may get a good deal and he'll buy a behemoth at 90, even though he had set 100. So the increment, the balance of the 10 remains chulin.
And won't the rest of the money go to hektish? Because he's makdish the money.
I don't know exactly. Was he magdish it as an absolute hakdasha, or he said whatever most I need from this pile for the purchase of a chatas to fulfill my chiyuv, that's going to be designated. Or as you say, maybe the whole pile is hegdish, and he has to buy the dava with the balance of the months. Now, what do you do with a chatos shemesa in the case of mohs? In the case of chatos shemesa from behema, he'll lock it up and he'll die. But in the case of mohs, what do? You lock up the mohs and they'll die? He says, based on a Mishnah in Torah, that chatos hamesos b'mos, right? So again, let's go through the case. He designated two different piles of mohs, and now he brings one pile. What happens to the other pile? He says, Yolich osam liyamamel. He throws them into Yamamel. And basically that's halach that applies in every case of an Isser Hana, which you cannot benefit from. So like, let's say, for example, if I don't want to say but let's say Ruvain buys chametz on Pesach, and he's not allowed to benefit from that chametz because chametz is also by no. I'm sorry. Let's say let me say it differently. Ruvain sells chametz on Pesach, so the buyer pays him 100, and the seller, if he enjoys the benefit of that 100, he is considered to have been nene from chametz. That has to do with the halacha of chalipe hanam, like for example in shpiyas, right? You have halacha where the kedusha shpiyas transfers over to the damim, and from the damim to the purchase through the damim, etc., etc. Or in avodah zarah, lahavdil, on the negative side, we have chalipe avodah zarah. Here, what's going to happen is that if he sells chametz, then he takes the mos, the damim that he received in payment for the mos, and he's molech liyam hamelech. He throws it into the yam hamelech. The Gemara has it even by chametz. If you end up with chametz over Pesach, and therefore you violate Pal Yerobei Motzi, you have to take the chametz and throw it into the yam hamelech. So the Gemara is bothered by that because maybe someone's going to find the chametz and he won't know that it's chametz, and he'll eat it on Pesach. Anyway, that's the halacha of molech liyam hamelech.
Does it mean literally Yam HaMelech? Does it mean literally Yam HaMelech?
If Judah. Now we move on to number Zion. Again, he's got 2 piles of mos in order to guarantee that he'll have enough mos for the chatas in event that one of those piles gets lost. Af l'shitas Rabbi Shimon shamafresh shtei chatos lachrayos. Okay, now let's go back to the animal case. So he's mafresh 2 animals for the same one singular chiv chatos, v'niskaper b'achas mihem, and he brought one of them on the mizbeach. The other one, which was a security, a guarantee carbon, that one is a chatos hamesos. But mikamakom b'mos ain't okay. V'mos hashniim yiplu l'nidav. So 1 second. How is this different than the previous case? Just 1 second. It's chatos hamisos, which so until now we've been discussing a case where he lost one of the 2 piles, or maybe he only has 1 pile and he lost it, and then he found it. And before he found it, he already brought a replacement carbon. So he's no longer chayav. And what do you do with the mos? So we said, Yolech liyam hamelech. If, on the other hand, he would locate the first mos, and he hasn't yet brought a kapara, then he will pool the 2 piles of mos with all the dinim that we spoke of. But now we're talking about a case where he was mafresh shtei aremos lachrayus. What do we do with the second part? He's only going to need 1 pile to bring the carbon. So he says that in this case, the mos will fall for the double. When do we say that the mos he's got to be molech liyam hamelech? That's in the case of chatos hamesos, but not in the case of achrayos. So again, chatos hamesos means, as we said before, he designated 1 pile, lost it, and then designated the second pile. First pile is mesos. What do we do with mesos? I mean, it's not an animal, it's not a live being. Molech liyam hamelech. Now we're talking about a case where it was mafresh 2 piles of mos lachrayos. That's not chatos hamesos. Is then the halach is yiplu l'nedava, which I think means that the Das HaMakdish, if you analyze his mindset, what was his intention when he set up a second pile of Mos as security in event that he loses the first set of Mos? I'm giving it to Hegdish. Will it be for a Chatos? Maybe yes, maybe no. I've designated two piles such that if I lose one of them, I have the other one. I didn't lose any of them. One of them is now going to be earmarked for Chatas. But in his mind, he decided that the other one would be earmarked for what we call a carbon and double. So I just want to review this in my mind one last time because I was thinking, if he's mafresh one set of modes and they get lost, now we replace it and it was miskaper, then the first set of modes are mesons, and that means yolef liyamamel. If on the other hand, he designated two sets of modes, then up front he has in mind that one of those two sets, the one that's not going to be used for a chatos, becomes a dove, a carbon dove. Okay, now avuda. So we've been talking over and over again where he designated a chatos, he got lost, and he replaced it. Right? Kipru baleh bacheres, he replaced it, and he brought the second replacement carbon on the mizbeach. He already achieved kapara, and therefore the first chatos is out. Mesos. Eino ella avuda biyom v'lo ba'avuda b'layla. You may remember that we discussed avuda as we called it a chalushem. There's a legal category called avuda, and we proved it. Now we're saying that part of the conditions of avuda is it's got to be avuda at the time that the migdash is up and running. Right, the migdash opens up for business with zrichas hachama in the morning and closes for business with shkias hachama. And we're saying now that avuda means during that time period that it could have been brought as a carbon, it was lost. That's only by yom. But if it's lost at night, that's not called avuda because we don't have the potential of bringing a carbon at night. So he says avuda biyom v'lo avuda b'layla. Now, what would avuda b'layla mean? It's a little bit strange. If he lost it at night, he doesn't have it the next day either. And if he doesn't have it the next day either, then it's avuda biyom. So who cares if it was avuda b'layla? This whole concept of avuda b'layla defies comprehension. Ella, what are you going to tell me? It was avuda b'layla and he found it. So if he found it, then it's not avuda. It says Beperush in interpreting avudas layla shtei lishonos b'gemara. Oh, shem nevda b'layla v'hifesh acheres tachtel v'nimtzeis bayom lo hoisa avuda ela b'layla. Tu ein nikreis avuda. So he sort of despaired of ever finding this carbon because he lost it at night. In the meantime, he designated a second carbon as a replacement for the first. And then with daybreak, he located the first carbon. So does it have the status of avuda? Well, the answer is no, because it was only avuda b'layla. And we're saying that avuda requires avuda b'yom. So the Chal Hashem Avuda is null and void in this case. There's no Chal Hashem Avuda. Why? Because it was only Avuda Balayla. He found it beyond. You'll ask me, but he was mafresh a second carbon as a replacement of the first. Fine. So let's say he brings the second carbon, but the first carbon is not Avuda. And if it's not Avuda, it's not a Chatas HaMesa. Ulefichach afim liachar mikan niskaper b'shtia ein Avuda Mesa. And that's one lishna in the Gemara. It's so fascinating because usually when we see the word Avuda, we think of the second parak of Elamitzias, which we learned in 4th grade. I don't think we understood it, but anyway. So Avuda, it would make no difference in Hilchas Hashavas Aveda whether you lost something by day or by night. Maybe there's more of a Yerush if you lost it at night, because like we pass in Mokum Avi Simon, but he doesn't know where he lost it, so there's no Simon and Mokum at night. I don't know. But certainly there's no Chal Hashem Avuda Balayla as opposed to Avuda B'yom. But in Halach of Chatas Shemesa, where he lost the first carbon and he replaced it with a second, if he finds the carbon such that his Avuda was only at night, it's not Avuda. And therefore, even if he brought the second replacement carbon on his back, the first carbon is not a Chatas Shemesa, because it's not Avuda. I mean, it's wild. I mean, all the ingredients are there. He lost it, replaced it, and not only that, he brought the second carbon. What is he going to do with the first carbon? It's a Chatas HaMesa. No. It was not Avuda. So then it's Yerush Ashis time, and then Yiplu L'Nedava, and the whole, but it's not a Chatas HaMesa because it was not Avuda. Oh, Dilma, now we get to the second side in the Gemara, the second Mishnah. Im Avda Balayla, Af im Nimtzeis Li Achar Hayom, this Kapro Baila B'Shvia. This is mind-boggling. Rabbi, so when they tell you that Kodshim is abstract, this is what they have in mind. This is about as abstract as you can get. It's not Avuda, even though he didn't find it the next day. It's out there somewhere in the Veld. And he brought a second carbon to replace the first carbon. It's this Kappa of Island. No. He finds the first carbon, and it's not Chatas HaMesa. It's not Avuda. Why not? Because he lost it at night. The Tchilas Aveda was at night. It's totally abstract. Has no psychological, or shall I say intuitively logical explanation. Who cares when he lost it? It was lost during the day. He brought a replacement carbon. He was miskapeh. Tchilas Avedasa B'Layla. There's no Chal Hashem Avud. Remember, we used the word reisa. Remember, we said that you could have two reisas. One is this kapru bailim, and number two, it's avuda. And avuda is a stamp. It's a non-kosher stamp on a chatas. Avuda. But you can only put that stamp on, according to this side of the Gemara, if it was avuda, the tchilas aveda was bayom. Again, what I'm going to say now is absolutely ridiculous. Don't even listen to me. Maybe the halach of Chatas Shamesa is a penalty for the bailer, that they weren't careful. And if he lost it at night, that's not a first class shir. It's like we can go into the halachas of Misham Rechina, who's potter for Gneva Aveda. So maybe he's potter for Gneva at night, but he'd be chai for Gneva during the day. And V'chein halacha, passes like the second side, that if the loss took place at night, it's not a Chatas Shemes. leads us over to page Yud Beis. But I think we're short on time now, so let's make a note that we got up to Yud Beis, and we'll pick that up in Mirza Shem. We'll pick that up in Mirza Shem. Okay.